Hi, everybody. It's Laurie White back once again with another edition of Chamber TV. This is episode number 141, believe it or not. So we are back again. This is your place to turn for all things chamber related for your professional success. So we invite on to Chamber TV friends and authors and members and subject matter experts who have interesting stories to share and interesting skills to share and interesting insights. So today is no different. We are really thrilled and excited to have Kaydi McQuade from Back Pocket Resources back with us once again. Kaydi, you've been with us. Is this your third time on Chamber TV?
Third time's the charm, yeah.
Third time's the charm. I thought so. So we've always had a great conversation, you and I, Kaydi, talking about all things human resource related, workforce related, talent development related, something that's truly on the minds of everybody today in light of the great resignation, as it were. So today we're going to be talking about how employers and employees can get on the same sheet of music relative to the job search and what tips employers can use. You know, they're out there shouting into the wilderness, as Kaydi told me just a few minutes ago before we went live, you know, the real disconnect and the reskilling and what's happened to the workforce in terms of people having different priorities post-pandemic and sort of like a reawakening of what their personal vision is in life. So with that intro, Kaydi, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead us through today's presentation. And we are live. We are live on Facebook. We are live on Twitter. And we are live on YouTube. As always, we invite your questions. We invite your comments. Just drop them in the chat box. Our chamber team will be monitoring your questions and we will pose them to Kaydi in real time. So take it away, Kaydi.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Laurie. I love the intro and it feels like coming home again, right? To be back with the Chamber TV. Yeah, one of the things that's come up in the course of, we'll call it late stage pandemic. I don't know if it's really post-pandemic yet, but there has been a great resignation. There's been a lot of realignment. A lot of people are looking to shift where they're working, thinking about their careers in different ways. And there's just been, we've seen this huge disconnect. You hear from employers who say, there's nobody, I can't find anyone, nobody's applying for jobs. And you hear from candidates who say, I'm pulling out my hair, literally applying for dozens of positions, and I don't even get a call back. I don't even get an email to respond. So my goal in setting up this presentation today is to help those who are either in the job market or thinking about how they're going to approach their next step in their careers, because the way that we search for jobs has changed, and the way that job seekers and employers connect is different probably than it even was a couple of years ago. And so, you know, that being said, it is, especially for job seekers, it can be a very disempowering and frustrating experience. So I'm hoping in this presentation that I will be able to provide you some tools and strategies for how to make it less frustrating and also how to be more successful in the course of your job search. So there is a different perspective that talent acquisition specialists or recruiters are using both internally and externally. They're using a different set of tools than your average job seeker is using in order to get noticed. And so by not being in that same place, a lot of times they just sort of ships in the night, passing. They just don't even necessarily know that the other one exists. So one of the big focuses of this presentation today is and if you can move to the next slide, I broke it down into 3 sections, right? So we're gonna do a little bit of pre-work, or I'm gonna really give you some strategies and some rationales for the pre-work. So this could be either before you leave your current position, when you're thinking about what you want to be when you grow up, what your next step in your career is, or it can be If you've already left your previous position or been laid off, terminated, furloughed, anything like that, and you're looking for what's next, right? The sense of urgency with which you approach it might change, but I still really recommend that you take the time and do the work before you just start blasting out resumes, because it will just be so much more successful. You want to set yourself up for success. So in the way that you approach your job search, we'll talk about strategies to become more organized, to become more efficient, and to present yourself more in the way that you want to be seen, right? To be sure that what you're putting out is what you want to be getting back. And then finally, how to attract the right attention, right? It does very little good to have dozens of calls and emails and useless interactions where you don't want the job they're offering, they don't want you for the position that they're offering, right? You want to have a targeted approach that lets you get in front of the people that are going to be the most helpful for you. So it is a lot to cover. There is, and books, self-help books and trainings and all sorts of things have been written on the topic. So, without talking any faster than I naturally do, I'm going to attempt to cover a lot of information in a short period of time, but please do use the chat functions, because if I'm not covering something clearly, or if you need a little bit more information about something that I cover, I'm happy to go back and adjust to that. I want to make sure that you're getting something out of this, not just having an opportunity for myself to talk. Different people are at different points in their careers, so I'm trying to approach it from a broad perspective, both so early career people and more senior people will also have some value to come out of this. And really at the end of the day, the more self-awareness, the more self-knowledge that you've developed and can express efficiently, the better off you're going to be. So you'll notice I have not been talking about how you're working the jobs boards. I have not been talking about how you're making your resume look really pretty. I have not been talking about, strategies for being the first one to put an application in or anything like that. Those tricks don't really work, unfortunately. There's possibly a time that they might have worked, but at the end of the day, it is work to look for a new job, and it will take time, it will take organization, and it will take the same skills that you've brought to successfully move your career along to this point. You need to approach your job search in the same fashion. So it can't just be a scattershot, haphazard. I woke up at 2 a.m. and started scrolling on Indeed and clicked apply for 15 different positions. That's just highly unlikely to have any positive results for you. So what does have good results, right? We're going to start out with the pre-work. Okay, so on the next slide, you cannot decide entirely what your compensation is, right? But you should have an idea of what your wishes, wants, and needs are. And the way I define those, wishes are the things, they're like sort of the icing on top. It's the things that make it, like, oh my gosh, if I could find a job that offers me X, that would be amazing. Wants are things that are pretty important to you, right? They may not be absolutely critical. You may be able to flex on some of them. Needs are your floor, your basement, right? You absolutely need this. And so we tend to think about, like, I will not take a job where I earn less than X dollars per year. And certainly salary should factor into that. But there are other sort of non-cash compensations that come into play, right? And they're going to be different for different people. They're going to be different even for individuals at different points in their careers, right? Early on in my career, I could not have cared less about what the retirement match was in my companies that I worked in. I probably should have, but whatever, I didn't at the time, right? Later on in my career, I was much more interested in things like flexible working and whether or not there was daycare allowances, right? Later on in my career, maybe I'll care more about PTO, vacation time, the amount of time that I'm able to take off to enjoy my life. Or I might decide that I'm more interested in what the company's scholarship opportunities are for my children. So I don't know what things are the most important for each individual person that's listening today. And I can't even tell you what the most important things are for me, but I can tell you which things I would never consider a job without, right? If I don't have a sufficient amount of training, I'm not interested in a job. If I'm not able to find a job that gives me enough time off that I can attend to what I need to for my family, I'm not interested, right? Would it be nice if I could bring my dog to work? Yes. Is it a deal breaker for me? No, right? But for some people, in some companies, in some situations, that might be treated differently. So we'll send this deck out. I assume we always have in the past, but we'll send the deck out. These are ideas. There might be different things for you, but you should really do a little bit of soul searching, right? If I'm going into this, what are the things that I need to have at a minimum, and what would I really like? Because that will help you to target roles. It will help you to target companies or organizations. It will help you to target industries, right? There are certain industries where it is very common to have work from home flexibility and unlimited PTO. There are other industries where that is just not possible, right? And, so you could look at the difference between, if you're an IT superstar, the difference between being in a technology startup versus being in a manufacturing standpoint, even if you're necessarily doing the exact same work, right? In IT or finance or any of those functions, you may be in a company culture where those things that are important to you personally are not acceptable to the company. So definitely think about those sorts of things. The next point I'm going to bring up is an interest and skills inventory. And I know this feels like what your guidance counselor had you do in middle school. It's the next slide, please. But these questions are guidance, right? These are ideas. And I always say, what do I want to be when I grow up, right? But really think about it. What were the parts of your last position that you really loved? And what were the parts that you really hated, right? How can you move towards spending more of your time doing the things that are interesting to you, that help you to develop the competencies that you want? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself at retirement? What do you need to do in order to get there? So you can backwards plan for your next role to allow you to do that, right? The point of doing these exercises is to understand where you should be focusing your attention. Okay, so it's not just sort of like navel gazing, like, okay, I need to think about myself, and I am definitely not a coach. There are people who are amazing at that, who, if you feel like this stuff is really opaque to you, that's someone that you might want to connect with, right? You may want to connect with a career coach. You may want to connect with someone who can help you to navigate where you're going next in your career. For many people, it's really straightforward, right? I am at this level of responsibility. I would like to move to a role in which I'm at this level +1 of responsibility, right? I am seeking to have better benefits or more vacation time or greater compensation, more opportunities for professional development. Whatever is the thing that's helping you to decide that it's time to move to your next role, those should be factored into where you're targeting your position. Okay. Now, how do you target your position, right? Where do you look? And this is where you want to set yourself up for success. You do need to do a bunch of work on your resume. Everyone knows that. But on the next slide, I want you also to do a bunch of work on your LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is an incredibly powerful tool. And like all incredibly powerful tools, the force and magic wands and everything else, it can be used for good and it can be used for harm, right? So your LinkedIn profile is not like other social medias. Facebooks and Twitters and TikToks of the world are great, and those are really social medias. For LinkedIn, it's a bit of a misnomer to think of it as a social media, because it really is a professional networking tool. and it should be treated like you would treat any other professional networking situation. So you wouldn't go to a chamber event, for example, and start ranting about a controversial political opinion or a controversial sports opinion, right? Because you might offend someone and you might be thought of as being unprofessional, right? So your LinkedIn profile, you should go and you should make sure, and I've done a whole speech on this with the chamber. So if you look back on Chamber TV, this whole thing exists there. Make sure it's up to date, it's accurate, it's descriptive, that your contact information is there, that your skills and relevant keywords are there, so that if someone is searching for you, they're finding you. Make sure that you have updated your connections, right? Anyone you've been working with, anyone that you've had interactions with professionally, you should connect with them. And you should seek recommendations and offer recommendations to people that you've worked with in the past. It shows you to be more active. It will cause your LinkedIn, excuse me, it will cause your LinkedIn profile to rise to the top based on how the algorithm works. It'll help you to rise up higher in the rankings of who gets seen. So if somebody's searching in for your job title in your area and you don't have those things accurately listed in your profile, they're not going to find you. Right? You want to be found. You don't want to add skills that you don't possess. There's sometimes people who feel like, oh, well, I walked past a building one time where this was being done, or 15 years ago, I kind of sort of did this, right? That's not going to help you because it's not presenting you with your own true skills. Make sure that you are using LinkedIn to its best advantage. You should be connecting with people once you've done your interest and skills inventory and you know what types of organizations you want to work in. You should be looking in your LinkedIn for people who are connected with those companies or with those industries. And you should be reaching out to ask them, hey, would you have a virtual coffee with me? Could we chat about how you got into this industry? People are willing to help, but you need to ask them. Definitely coming back to that. Okay. And the last little bit of pre-work that really starts to transition us into making sure you set yourself up for success is your elevator pitch. Now, most people, whether they know it or not, have an elevator pitch for what they do. Most people, when they are unemployed, start to find this really difficult, right? It starts to be, well, I'm in between roles right now, or I used to do this. You want to be talking in a positive and forward-looking way, and this is the next slide, about who you are, the value you bring, and what you are looking for. So it's basically your 30-second commercial, right? The elevator pitch was originally like how much of your sale you could handle in the elevator ride up to meeting the client. It should be the same thing. If people have started going to cocktail parties again, or when you're meeting people casually, you want to be able to say, okay, who you are, what are you looking for, and what you offer, right? This is where you want to brag a little. You don't want to come apart or come across as, oh, I'm the greatest of all time and you absolutely need me. But at the same time, because I've grown in this and that way, or because I'm at this level of my career, I'm looking for this type of a role in this type of an industry so that I can do this, right? You want to get your personality shining through everything else. So I left a little box there that you can be jotting ideas in, and this is hard work. When you meet people and you say who you are and what you're looking for, you're going to stumble. So as you're working on this is where you can rope in family, friends, former colleagues, and say, hey, does this sound like me? Am I accurately representing myself? Would you want to know more? Would you be interested in setting up an interview with somebody who came to you with this presentation, right? Take that feedback and improve your elevator pitch, because that is how you are going to get yourself noticed, right? That's how you're going to get the right attention. So now you've thought really carefully about what you want to do, what parts of your job you like the best. You've thought about some potential companies that you want to target, and you've started improving your presentation on your LinkedIn profile and in person on your elevator pitch. Now finally, is when you want to go onto the job boards. Okay, now is when you want to look at positions that are interesting to you. And you want to start thinking about, like, okay, what keywords and phrases are they using in these so that I can make sure that I'm using those keywords and phrases when I'm describing myself. So I want to make sure that they are in my descriptions in my LinkedIn profile. I want to make sure that that terminology or those phrases are being used in my resume to describe the work I did. Remember that different companies and different industries will use different phrasing for the same tasks sometimes, or they'll use the same phrasing for different tasks, right? So, you may have a company that describes a particular function in a particular way, but it might not be widely recognized, right? If you've only been in that company, or if you've been in that company for a long time, without looking out at what is being listed, you won't necessarily know what is being talked about in other industries or in other companies for doing those same tasks, right? So they're not going to necessarily recognize the way that you're describing the work you did if you're not using a common language. Also, when you're looking through those job descriptions, you want to be gathering your own keywords and phrases. You want to be making sure that you recognize those, but you also want to be making sure that you understand what those companies are looking for. And it can be hard sometimes, right? Again, this is a time for you to reach into your network and ask about having an informational interview. Ask about having a conversation, right? In the next slide, you want to leverage your network, right? You want to talk to the people that you know, and they have to be SMART asks, right? So SMART is an acronym for SMART, measurable, attainable, timely. What's the R? Oh, I lost it. Realistic and timely. So you don't want to just blast out onto your social media like, hey, I got laid off. Can anyone help me connect with new jobs doing X, Y, or Z? Okay. It's too vague. It's too broad, and it doesn't connect to anyone, right? You want to think about who you know, specific individuals that you know, and how they can help you. And then you want to ask them clearly, hey, Mike, I see that you are connected with Sally, who works at ABC Company. She has a job listed that I'm interested in talking to her about. Will you introduce us? I'd like to talk to her by next week if possible, right? Why are you asking? What's your goal, right? People don't want to refuse to help friends and colleagues, but they also don't want to burn their own social capital if they don't know why, right? They don't want to just introduce you to every person they've ever met who is a manager in whatever field they're in if they don't know what you're looking for, if they don't know how they're helping specifically, right? So you don't want to just send out a generalized request like, hey, help, okay? It's just like if you're looking for someone to help you move furniture, right? If you put it out on Facebook, you're going to hear nothing but crickets, right? But if you turn to a friend and you say, hey, Sarah, I know you have a pickup truck and I really need to move this couch on Saturday afternoon. Would you be willing to help me for an hour or two and I'll buy you a pizza? Sarah might be available, right? But you have to make your asks specific. They have to be measurable, right? I don't just want help in general. I want help with this one specific thing. I don't just want all of your attention, right? I need you to do this one thing for me in a certain time frame so that I can have this result that I'm hoping for. And I recommend this very highly. There are wonderful search engines. There are wonderful jobs boards. But what ends up happening is because anyone can apply with just a click of a button, lots of people do. And so then the systems get set up and we end up in the arms race that we're in right now, where, in the old days, you would have a classified ad and it would say 2 lines in newsprint in the back of the paper. And they would have to meet with people and people would have to either bring or mail a hard copy of their cover letter and resume that they had to kind of type out individually to the company that was hiring, right? Then we could fax multiple copies. Now we can flood the inboxes. And because there's so much there, the companies, as a protective gesture, they can't go through hundreds and hundreds of resumes for every position that comes in. So they've set up screening tools, right? Either the questions that are asked by the job board itself, right? That asks you how many years of experience you've done this, or when you've ever encountered this particular technology or whatever. Those are screening tools. And if you don't give the question the answer that it's looking for, your resume goes into a different file and it never gets seen by a person. Similarly, if you don't have the right keywords on your resume, in your cover letter, those you may never ever get seen by a person. And so that's where a lot of the frustration comes on the part of job seekers, is they'll say, oh, I've been applying to 15 jobs a day and I still have heard nothing. It's almost mathematically impossible to apply for 15 jobs a day beyond an entry-level position, simply because actually applying takes some effort, right? You need to try to talk to the right person, right? Clicking apply on the jobs boards is very easy, but it's not going to get you the notice that you need. It's not going to get you the attention that you need because it's not going to get in front of a human being. And so then you're at the mercy of making sure that the keywords in your resume are matching the keywords that they're searching for. And you'll find all sorts of funny little tricks, like people who write thousands of keywords in white 3-point font in the margins of their resumes because the computers will find it, even if the people that are looking at it don't do that, right? Connect with people. Talk to people in your network. Talk to people who are in the companies that you're targeting. Talk to people who are friends of friends and understand where those connections can be made, because they probably will tell you, right? If a job, it's not what you're qualified to do, they're likely to tell you. And if you are qualified to do it and it's interesting to you, you'll know a little bit about the company before you set foot in there. So you'll know if there's a cultural fit. You'll know if there's a work-life balance alignment. You'll know all those things walking in, so you're not wasting your time having interviews with companies that are not a good fit for you. I put as a bonus consideration on here that you should always be building your network, right? Even if you're not currently in the job market, right? We're kind of at a point in history where nobody is ever completely out of the job market, right? Until you retire, you're always sort of looking for whatever's next. There's always the potential that your company gets acquired or shut down or offshored or anything like that. So even if you are thinking, nope, I want to stay with this company until the day I retire, that might not be an option through no fault of your own and through no fault of the company's, right? So are there new groups or clubs that you could join? Are there workshops you could attend or trainings you could participate in that could help you connect with any targeted companies, either the employees or the companies themselves, right? Some of the leadership team. Like I said, LinkedIn is a powerful tool for you too. You can search. It's a regular Boolean search. So up at the top corner, you can search the name of the company and you can search the name of the title that you're gunning for, and you can see if you can talk to anyone who's already in that position and understand is it really a good fit for you, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can take some time to make sure that you understand what's best for you, what's the next steps for you, to make sure that you understand the companies and the roles that you're targeting and understand if those are really the positions you want. and to make sure that you are getting connected with and noticed by the people who would be able to make those connections for you. Tons of information, I know. I have all my contact information, which is on the next slide. And we'll be sending out an email afterwards so that you've got any other information that you need. I can't see the chat from where I am, so I don't know if there's been any comments, but I'm sure Laurie's got some questions for me because I feel like I just covered a lot in a really short period of time. So
you certainly did cover a lot in a short period of time, but it was, really good information, very specific. So you put out a very smart agenda, a smart deck there. I wanted to ask you about cover letters. What makes a good cover letter? And to your point of, it's almost mathematically impossible to apply to 15 jobs a day. That's because if you are going to really be serious about applying at a certain organization, you ought to take the time to put together an individual, specific, targeted, relevant, up-to-date cover letter that is specific to the company that you're applying to, right?
Absolutely. And you should potentially be altering your resume or have several versions of your resume for the exact same reason, right? If you are applying to a management level job, but you're applying in a couple of different industry verticals, you're going to make some tweaks. You're going to make some changes to reflect the different work that's in there, right? If you're, for example, if you're in nonprofits or government or the private sector, right? Those might be, you could still be a controller. Could still be a finance person, but you would want to emphasize different aspects of your experience. A really targeted cover letter is talking specifically about the requirements that are laid out in the job description. And we can have a whole other conversation about job descriptions because they can sometimes be everything but the kitchen sink. But it should respond to at least what you were interpreting the main points of the job description to be, and how your experience is relevant to those tasks and how you bring the skills necessary for the company. You should show some knowledge of the company. You should show some knowledge of the industry, because that shows that you're taking the time to actively apply rather than just put it in. Anytime you can get it to a person rather than a portal, you're going to be in better shape. And a lot of times they'll still say, well, we still have a policy that you apply through the portal. Okay, but if they are actually impressed with you, they will go looking for your resume among the hundreds that have come in rather than just accepting what makes it through the filtering software.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So how long, in terms of the cover letter, is it important to keep it to, one page? I don't know if the computers and the algorithms know the difference between one page and 1,000 pages, but any thoughts and tips on, how specifically to address the qualifications that they're seeking?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to address every concern in a cover letter, right? That's why you would come in for an interview. That's why you would meet with them. And even there, you may be working at a company for 6 months before people find out everything about you, or longer, right? So it's you don't want to do an exhaustive letter. People are busy, right? People who are looking to make a hire, normally they don't start making the hire until everyone's running around with their hair on fire, the work's not getting done, or somebody's staying till late at night trying to get it done, everything else, right? So you don't want to make reading your cover letter into another, Sisyphean task that has them staying up all night. So, generally you want to keep it roughly to a page. And you don't want to fill it with a ton of fluff, right? Nobody cares that you were the president of your sorority in college in this context, right? Unless it is specifically tied to the job that you're applying to do, it doesn't need to be in your cover letter. You want it to be something that somebody can read, scan through quickly in a minute or so, right? They may not have all the details, but they will have a fairly good idea of you
Mhm.
in not a lot of time.
If you're an employer and you get a cover letter or get an application from somebody and it looks as though it was just basically, cut and paste and drop and push the button and send it out. Do you think that it's a wise strategy from the employer perspective to say, hey, if this person's just, slamming it out, I've got no interest in that, and just, summarily deleting?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, most of the filtering software will do that for them, so that they don't even have to get it to a person. It'll definitely be, you know, generally, if and it's harder depending on the industry. If you don't post as many jobs and if you don't have anything, but if you have received a resume before, exactly the same resume, exactly the same cover letter before, it should boot it as a duplicate. Otherwise, people would, click apply, 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 apply. So they're all set up so that unless you specifically allow it, duplicate resumes shouldn't make it through the filtering software, which is another reason why, as an applicant, if you are applying for a similar position to another role that you applied for with a company, maybe you didn't make it through the first application cycle. You're going to want to make some changes so that you're not getting booted out as a duplicate applicant.
Mhm.
Duplicate applicant. That's harder to say than I thought.
A duplicate applicant.
When I slowed down, I could do it.
Syllables. I want to draw you out on another point that you made about enlisting the help of others in your
Mhm.
job search. And I want to push back just a little bit or get you to nuance what you were saying. And I think we were in alignment on it, but I just want to underscore one caveat. And been doing a lot of reading lately, different books, and some of the more contemporary blogs about the notion of being on the other side. If you're an employer or if you're an influencer, you're some kind of leader in industry, recognized expert, and the barrage of requests that you get to say, hey, let's grab coffee. Hey, can I pick your brain? Hey, can we meet? Hey, can you go to lunch? And hey, can you give me some advice? And the degree to which it's inappropriate, it's not welcome, and when it's when people on the other end are asking for something that cuts into the political capital that somebody might have with an organization. And I think you referenced that. So how would you recommend that, or how would you caution job applicants to really be very, very, very careful when they just approach somebody that they don't know, ask for something that's inappropriate, and want to do the proverbial let's grab coffee so I can pick your brain, which is, I would say, something that you hear a lot and it's not really appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I agree with you completely, right? There are certain people who are getting asked all the time for coffee by people for whom it's not relevant for them to have coffee at all, right? Or with whom it's not relevant for them to have coffee at all. Um, so yes, you don't want to just start, sending emails to the CEO of your target company and saying like, "Hey, would you," right? Um, when I'm talking about leveraging your network, I'm talking predominantly about talking to people that you specifically know or you've met, people that are former colleagues, people that are folks that you know from another context, whether it's our, I mean, it could be down to like our kids play soccer together. It can be, this is the person who, works with my current or formerly worked with my current colleague. It should be someone that you have a connection with, and you should be asking them for something specific. There has to be an expectation that you can't just come cap in hand and offer nothing in exchange, right? There has to be some reason. Now, obviously, if you are only talking about it from the context of, how can you help me in my job search? you're going to have less of a positive response than you are if you're saying throughout your career, you know, I'd love to talk with you about how you approached this or that project, right? I noticed that you were involved in a this type of change within your organization. I'd love to talk with you about that because we're thinking about doing something similar. Those types of conversations, it feels very natural to say, okay, well, you know what, that sounds like a really good organization to be a part of. I'd really love to, you know, please let me know when there's something open in your organization that I could connect with you on. Versus that very transactional, like, hey, let's get a coffee and then here's my resume, right? Like that, you're right, that feels
Coffee is such, you know, you never want to hear that.
right, absolutely, right? But when there's somebody who you've had a relationship with over time, and you maybe have not, like, especially right now, because there are a lot of people who used to see each other and interact with each other on a much more frequent basis and have not for the past 18 months or so, when a lot of companies have gone virtual, a lot of people have been working remotely. There's been a ton of disruption to that normal social wheel turning. That's a very appropriate time, I think, to reach out to an old colleague and say, like, hey, I'd like to catch up, and I find myself in the job market and would like to ask you for this one specific thing.
Mhm.
And understand, you know, like, not everybody is going to make the time for you. Just because you're asking doesn't mean you get, right? And you often won't get what you don't ask for, but asking for something doesn't guarantee that you get it.
Mhm. I like the way that you've, you know, you've qualified it by saying be really specific, because
Mhm.
if you outline that you want to talk to them because they have expertise in, um, you know, I don't know what, you know, financial accounting for nonprofit organizations. And if you're really specific when you are making that request, it allows for the person on the other side to know exactly, you know, why and specifically what. And if that person doesn't have any expertise in financial accounting and nonprofit organizations, it's not a wasted time, you know, a period of time for either, you know, the mentor or the mentee, if you will.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, asking clarifying questions on both sides, putting
Mhm.
clarifying questions together on both sides, I think is a real a strategy that's gaining a lot of traction these
Mhm.
days. I was just reading a book by Dory Clark. She's a well-known professional consultant and speaker, and she's written a whole book on exactly what we're talking about. And
Mhm.
she goes even further, Kaydi, and I'm sure I'd love to know how you feel about this too from your professional vantage point. One of her suggestions to her coaching clients is don't ask for a favor from someone until you have known them for 1 year. 1 year. So you can't just like parachute into their life, have a, you know, a transactional type of exchange, and then turn around and say, hey, you work for Amazon. Can you introduce me to Jeff Bezos? You know, I think that's exactly
Right.
that's exactly the scenario that she put forth in her book, and it's a great book.
Yeah, I love that concept. As with all things time driven, I always caught, like, you could have, you know, if you are really in the trenches with someone and working on a very intense project, you might develop a closer, you know, collegial relationship with them in a month on a very intense project than you do working in the cubicle next door to someone for 5 years, right? So I get squeamish about things like a year, but I do definitely think that, you know, there shouldn't be a request for anything until there has been some relationship developed. Absolutely. And that's one of the things I touched on it very quickly when I was talking about LinkedIn profiles. One of the best ways to get endorsements and recommendations on your LinkedIn profile is to go into other people's LinkedIn profiles and offer them like, literally just do recommendations and endorsements on their LinkedIn profiles, former colleagues, former bosses, former, you know, people that reported to you. And you'd be surprised, it pops up in their LinkedIn feed. It says, "Oh, Kaydi McQuade recommended you for the skill of this." And they say, "Oh, that's so nice. She was a really great colleague. Let me recommend her too." So there's, it doesn't have to be transactional, but it can be a nice reminder. Like,
do you see a void in qualifications? So everybody wants to move on. They're tired of their old job. They have decided that for any number of reasons going forward, it's not a good fit. They want any one of the things that you put out on your first slide about needs and wants and the like. So a candidate says, you know what, I'd really like a job as, a data analytics, analyst. And so the question is, when people are coming through and applying for the job, do you find that most folks are actually qualified for the job that they're trying to seek? And if they're not, is that a big deal? Or are employers saying, I'm just looking for somebody that has a good work ethic, a good, demeanor, someone who is willing to learn and can be trained?
There's a lot to unpack in that question, right? So yes, I think that there are tons of unqualified people who apply for jobs that are put up on the postings. And I think some of that is unintentional, right? Because the job descriptions are 5,000 words long and you can't understand what the key responsibilities of a role are sometimes. But yes, I also think that you get the people who took a 2-week Udemy course in Excel and have decided that they're a data scientist. 100%, that happens too. I think that companies sometimes have a misalignment between what they actually need and what they'd like. I think they could do a little soul searching around their wishes, wants, and needs, right? What does this person need to walk in on day one knowing how to do? And what is the stuff that's trainable? We once had a client who kept a really critical job open for months because they couldn't find anyone who had a very small piece of software that they could have trained that person in 2 weeks. And they ended up losing 2 other people because they burned out in the course of trying to find it. So I do sometimes think that companies aren't going in with their eyes wide open about what is actually important. I think sometimes they want, a PhD and 5 years of experience at an entry level salary scale. And that's why they're not finding what they're looking for. So I do think that I think that there's problems in communication up and down the chain. I do think that there are some roles where finding the right personality traits and the right work ethic and attitude it really is more important than the concrete skills that somebody necessarily brings in on day one. I also think that there are a ton of roles that have prerequisite skills that you really ought not to consider anyone, no matter how wonderful of a person they are. You ought not to consider them for the role if they don't have those before they walk in on day one. So that's a lot of words to say that it's a really variable sort of a thing. But I think that there is blame to go around in that situation.
So I think that's a great answer. It's, it all boils down to, it depends. It involves what you said about, doing the pre-work. So it's not just the pre-work on the part of the applicant, but it's also the pre-work on the part of the employer who is looking to bring someone in, right?
Absolutely.
So we are almost out of time, but we do have another question about that's come in about stackable certificates and badges and things of that nature that you can download and you can attach to your LinkedIn profile. Does an employer care about that?
It depends on the role. There are certain roles for which specific technological skills are really important. So a lot of times UI, UX, front-end developers, actually back-end developers too. Anytime you're in an industry where the technologies change really quickly and you're expected to pick up new softwares or new packages, new ways of doing things very often, those stackable certificates are a great way to demonstrate like, hey, I'm really passionate about this. I care, I continue to learn, and I understand that this is an evolving industry, right? There are other um, roles and types of positions for which they're just not that important. Um, Cost accrual accounting hasn't really changed that much, right? So the software might, and that might be something that's of value to a certain company. But if you're looking for a role in an industry that doesn't need that constant professional development, you may be spinning your wheels in a way that's not of the best benefit to you, where actually meeting with people in the industry might be a better use of your time. So joining an affinity group with that industry, or joining even their Slack channels, and there's all sorts of places where people can have conversations around particular industries. But yeah, if you're in something where there's new technologies all the time, those definitely can be a great way to demonstrate that you are a lifelong learner and somebody who's going to take well to new technologies, rather than sort of being like, no, I learned this 25 years ago and I'm not learning anything new.
Learned how to set type
Right.
at my newspaper.
Exactly. I can roll out the ink.
All right, so we are out of time, but before we leave you, Kaydi, let me just ask you to say a few words about Back Pocket Resources, and if somebody's listening right now and they're interested in learning more from you and being part of your influence circle, or retaining your business, retaining your firm to do any kind of search. What's your background? What's Back Pocket Resources all about, and how would folks best get in touch with you?
Yeah. So Back Pocket Resources is a company that consults with and trains small business leaders in HR practices around effective hiring, training, retention, culture building, all of the HR practices that small businesses don't have an HR department to handle for them. We teach you to do it internally, or we can consult with you to solve specific problems. I do also have a course designed, because we've worked so long in connecting employers and employees, or potential employees. We have a course designed on Teachable that is a more in-depth version of getting noticed in your search that we did today. It's got a lot more worksheets and a lot more interactive activities to guide you through the process than I could do in 45 minutes. So that link we can throw up there. I think you have that. I do have a half-off offer for that, which is Intro 921. All my contact, that's the search, or the course, get noticed in your search course. You can find that there. And then I also saw that my contact information got put on there. Please connect with me via email, phone. You can 100%, you can call me or connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can chat.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Kaydi, as always. Again, another wonderful presentation, chock full of useful advice that people can put to work right away. So that's really what we are all about here at the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. We thank you for your engagement, your expertise. Thank you for spending time with us on a wonderful Wednesday afternoon in the fall, and we will see you next time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.